All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for our May garden talk on Houseplants 101. Our presenter today is Brandie W, who has been a Genesee County Master Gardener for 10 years now. And I'm going to turn it over to Brandie.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me today. I'm going to start by telling you that I am not a houseplant expert. And I know I'm a master gardener and I'm supposed to know everything about plants, but I consider myself a houseplant novice. I started with houseplants about 4 years ago. I had an office with a south-facing window, and I crammed like 15 houseplants into that little office. And then in November, I took a new job and I had to bring all the houseplants home. So luckily, there's only been one fatality and the rest are surviving at home. So we're going to go through the basics. It's not as hard as everyone thinks, houseplants. So, how does it start? How do you become a houseplant person? And usually you're at the store and they have this nice display of these little houseplants and you're like, oh, it's $5, it's so little, so cute, I'm gonna buy this. And you impulse buy it and you don't know anything about it, you don't know what kind of light it needs, but you get it home and it's doing okay, and you're like, it's living and it's a little lonely, so I'll buy another one to go with it. And then a friend finds out, hey, she's got a couple houseplants, I'm going to give her a cutting. And then maybe another friend is like, hey, I've got to relocate, I'm going to give you some more of my houseplants when I'm moving. And then, it's like, bam, you turn into a houseplant person. And so wouldn't that just be lovely? It's such a lovely room. Why wouldn't you just grow plants outdoors? Why would you even bother to grow houseplants? And basically, it's good to bring nature's indoors. In Western New York, we have a super short growing season. It's nice to have something green inside. The benefits of being in and around nature to our mental well-being have been proven. So it's something that's nice to have around us. And having plants in your space, it really softens your interior design. Not to mention, they're super trendy right now, whether it's fake or real houseplants, they're all the rage. And my favorite is that they're the keepers of memories. So, if someone gifts you a plant or a cutting, you think about that person when you take care of that plant. Like maybe they gave you a plant for your birthday or a new job or a birth of a child, and you have that memory tied to that plant. Sometimes they even become family heirlooms. There was one article that I was reading that a woman had a cutting from a great aunt's wedding begonia that had been, passed down through the generations. And I think that that's really special. This plant here in this photo, I call it a pineapple spider plant. I don't even know what type of plant it is, but a 4-H Family Consumer Science Club gifted me this plant in a tin can that was decorated with fabric. It had about 1.5 inches of soil, and it lived in this tin can on my desk in a reception area with artificial lighting for like 4 years. And I finally repotted it, propagated it, and I think still of the 4-H club and the Master Gardener, shout out to Roberta, who provided the plants to that club to pot up. So they become, memory keepers, and they're just a prideful hobby. You keep them alive, you take care of them, maybe you propagate them, and it gives you a sense of joy. So the basics, the main factors is you want to source your plants from a reputable plant source, and you need to give them light, water, soil. They have temperature needs, humidity needs, containers with drainage, fertilizer, grooming, and repotting. And we have to remember that houseplants are native to somewhere. They all come from somewhere, and that somewhere is usually somewhere tropical and has a mild climate where it makes them suited for houseplants. Like this Chinese money plant is not native to my bathroom. It is native to southern China, like a rainforest type climate. So it's best to think, okay, let me learn more about this plant. Where did it come from? What does it need? And the same rule that you follow for perennial plants, the right plant in the right place, you want to follow that rule for house plants. You really want to put the right plant in the right place in your home environment. And you have to remember that the houseplants are confined to their container. They cannot send their roots out wider or deeper for food and water. You have to provide that for them. So, but luckily they're pretty adaptable and they're pretty easy to take care of.
Brandie, do you want to move the video?
Oh, yeah.
Great.
There we go. Okay. There we go. Okay, so the types of light. Light is, I think, by far the most important factor when you are considering a house plant. You want to understand its lighting requirements and how the light works in your environment. That is going to give you the best setup for success. And so you're ready to bring this plant home. It's easier to evaluate your environment first, but yes, we all impulse buy house plants. So still learn about the light in your environment. And I wanted to talk about the typical light levels first. In a lux measurement, it kind of helps put into perspective the value of light. So in this box, we have direct sun, which is outdoors. It is 100,000 lux levels. In bright shade, so you go under a tree when it's super bright out, it's 20,000 lux levels. On a heavy overcast day, it's 1,000. A good reading light in your home is 500. So what you think might be really bright inside of your house and bright enough for your, indirect bright house plant might not really be that light compared to the 500 lux level to a 20,000 in the shade. I'm sorry, we're going to save our questions to the end, okay? And so the types of light, we have direct light, bright indirect light, medium light, low light, and artificial light. And the plants need a combination of both light intensity and duration. They need about 14 hours of light a day. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly because, yeah, what is like bright indirect light? What does that really mean? We all read the plant tags and the one that everyone understands is low light. So direct light is the light that comes through a west or south facing window, and direct light is the most intense light that an indoor space will receive. And it exposes the plants directly to the sun's rays. And most common houseplants do not want direct sunlight. They do not want to be in the direct beam of the sun's rays. They're mostly understory shade plants. But a few can handle it. Birds of paradise, fishtail palms, cactus, and cacti and succulents can handle direct light. Then you move on to bright indirect light, and that is light that is not direct, but it's steady and bright. So think about the spots that are right next to a window that receives, a quick dash of direct light, but then it's like obstructed by a tree or the way the sun is moving. So bright indirect light is the most ideal for houseplants. Medium light are the areas of a room that are about half the distance between a window and the back wall. And these areas still receive steady light from windows, but it's just not as bright as the indirect light. Medium light is ideal for many palms, monstera, Chinese money plant, and philodendrons. Then you go into low light. So low light are the areas that are 7 or more feet away from the window, or in a space that has no natural light, like an office space with all fluorescent lighting. And there are actually a variety of plants that will tolerate low light. They just grow slower than their light-loving friends. So think about the cast iron plant, the snake plant, pothos, and ZZ plant. So going through this quickly, it's hard to envision, okay, I'm in my living room. What type of light do I really have? So I found this super swanky plant site. It's called Leon and George. And they have this really nice article that breaks down each window and what direction it faces, and it shows you where those lights will fall. So I'm just going to go through these quickly. So this is a north-facing window. In the Northern Hemisphere, windows that face true north do not receive any direct sunlight at any time during the day, and they receive a consistently diffused, gentle light. So plants that like medium to low light will do really well in a north-facing window, up to, I would say, within like 3 to 4 feet away from the window. So this kind of breaks it down here and shows you where the light falls in this north-facing room. And again, they have no curtains or anything, so I would say this is a bare window. You have the bright indirect light, the medium light is about 4 feet away, and then the low light is the farthest away. So we move on to south-facing windows. South-facing windows are the star of any room because this direction receives the most light throughout the day. The sun rises in the east, and as the planet rotates, the sun's rays hit a south-facing window from about late morning to mid-afternoon. And the south-facing window provides a good deal of bright light for most of the day. So most plants that they love to be closely situated to a south-facing window, but because it does receive direct sunlight, if it doesn't have curtains or blinds, you might need to put a sheer curtain to diffuse some of that light, especially in the summertime. And remember, the light will change in your home throughout the season. So some plants that are fussy, you might have to move them around throughout the season. And so here again, this is a window that has no curtains. So we have the direct sunlight pretty far into the room. And then you have your bright indirect light and your medium light at the back. The east-facing window, they receive sunlight in the morning when the sun rises, and that morning light is typically soft. So it makes an east-facing window a good match for plants that like bright indirect sunlight. And because it is a softer light, the plants will tolerate that direct light more than, say, a west-facing window. However, you want to keep an eye on it in the summer. If you don't have a tree or a curtain, the sunlight can be a bit more direct and hotter from the east-facing window. You might have to pull the plants back a little bit or provide them a little bit more protection. So again, we have the direct sunlight right near the window that comes through in the morning. Then you have the bright indirect light, the medium light at the back wall, and the low light at the very back. West-facing windows, by midday, the sun is high in the sky. It's getting ready to descend, and the sunlight will filter through west-facing windows from mid-afternoon until evening. But the light received by west-facing windows in the late afternoon is very strong when it is direct. So just be mindful of where you're placing those light-sensitive plants with a west-facing window. You might need to consider curtains for that afternoon sun, or maybe moving them more towards the middle of the room so they're not getting that direct light. Okay, so I think one of the hardest things with houseplants is figuring out what's wrong with them when they're unhappy, because the signs that they show you that they're unhappy cross over from too much water, too little water, too much light, not enough light, root bound. So they'll exhibit the same signs for many different problems. So you really have to be a plant detective and kind of learn to recognize the signs of why they're unhappy. So some of the signs that they are not getting enough light is that they will be leggy, they'll send out weak new growth, they'll be physically like leaning it towards the light. They want to reach more light. The variegated plants will tend to lose their variegation if there's not enough light. And then if they are too close or if they're getting too much light, they can actually get sunburned. And so you'll notice that the leaves will get scorched. They'll turn yellow or white. If it's really severe, they'll end up turning brown and crispy. So you're going to want to move them away from that direct bright light, give them a shade, diffused curtain. And also remember to try to rotate your plants, like maybe on your, when you check them for watering, give them a little rotation every week so that they evenly grow towards the light. Okay, watering. So houseplants are killed by improper watering. Usually it's overwatering than any other single factor when keeping houseplants. And we usually love them too much. So there is no general schedule for watering houseplants. Again, I'm very sorry. Do not say, yes, I'm going to water my houseplants every Saturday, because that is not the way to do it. Switch your mindset from watering every Saturday to checking your plants on whether or not they need water on Saturday. So the size of the plant, the size of the container, the light it receives, the temperature of your home, the humidity, the potting medium, the season we're in, those all influence the speed in which the soil dries out. Soil kept too wet or too dry will cause the roots to die and lead to plant death. So you want to get in the habit of checking your plants on whether or not they need water. Smaller pots are actually more difficult to take care of than larger pots because they dry out faster. The water does not move as uniformly through the pot when you water them. So small pots may require watering every 2 to 3 days, where larger pots you may not need to water for 7 to 14 days. So keep that in mind when you're picking out your pot sizes. And then, so instead of watering on a schedule, check your plants weekly to see which ones need water. And to do that, you can do that with the finger test. You put your finger in the soil up to your first knuckle and feel, is the soil dry or is it wet? You can also pick up the pot if you're able, if it's a size pot that you can handle. Is it light? Is it kind of heavy? Kind of remember, after I water this plant, how heavy is this pot? How does it feel? You know, find that groove. And then that will help you determine on whether or not the plant needs to be watered. I know that bonsai growers, I think they use a bamboo skewer. So like your shish kebab wooden skewers at the grocery store, they'll put them in the plant and then and down into the soil, and then they'll pull it out. If the wood is moist, they know the soil is still moist. If the wood is dry on the skewer, it's time to water. And each plant has different watering needs. So again, get to know your plant. Where did it come from? What does it need? Some plants like to dry out completely before they're rewatered. Some plants like to dry out halfway. Some don't like to dry out at all. They want to stay moist all the time. So really do the research on your plant, be a good plant parent and see what do they need. In general, plants need less water in the fall and the winter and more in the spring and the summer when they're actively growing. Ordinary tap water will be fine for houseplants. Rainwater or melted snow are the best. They're excellent sources of water for houseplants, but the chlorine and the fluoride added to treated water is said not to harm them. But water that's ran through a softener should be avoided because the salts will build up in the soil after time. You'll probably have to change the soil more often. And I would say it's more important to let the water be room temperature when you water, because think about it. You don't want to take a cold shower. Your plants don't want to take a cold shower. They're from tropical climates. So, you know, if you think about it, try to fill your watering container and leave it out, you know, for a couple hours, let it acclimate to the air temperature and your plants will be happier. Also, if you leave it out, I think after 3 days, some of the chlorine will have evaporated too.
Brandie, you gotta think about it.
I know. I don't know how to. Oh, okay. I don't know how to.
It should be it.
Before I just moved my mouse in it.
I have to like the chat. So that
Oh, okay. There we go. Okay, so watering methods. So you can water a different couple ways. You can top water, bottom water. When you do water, you want to avoid splashing the leaves. Misting it, I would just skip misting. It really doesn't do anything but clean the dust off of the leaves. They don't absorb that much moisture from it. If you want to get really fancy, they make indoor irrigation systems that you can hook up. And then there's also the wicking method, which I'll show you. So top watering is just that. We water from the top. Try to use a narrow spout so you're not getting water on the leaves. Some leaves are sensitive to water and it can actually scorch the leaves when they get wet. And you want to water so that the soil is completely soaked. So I take my plants, most of them are mobile. I can pick them up and carry them to the kitchen sink, and I water them from the top until the water is running through the drainage hole. So you want to make sure that that soil becomes completely saturated. Then I just let them drain for a couple more minutes and I put them back in their either their saucer or their decorative pot. Bottom watering, Nikki Jabor, she's a Canadian gardener and she switched over several years ago. She only uses bottom watering. So it provides an even distribution of moisture throughout the entire soil mass, because sometimes even if you try to water thoroughly, top watering can result in dry spots throughout the soil. The downside of bottom watering is that it can lead to buildup minerals and salts in the soil, but that's easily remedied by just top watering every once in a while and flushing those out. So you can use your kitchen sink, you can use your bathtub, you can use a tote, a solid plant tray. You put about 1 to 2 inches of water in the container that you're going to put your plants in for smaller pots. And then you'd want to add 3 inches of water if you're going to do like 10 to 14 inch pots. So you place the containers in the tub of water. And if you are using plastic pots, you might have to do a little top watering just to balance out the weight, because they might flip over from being too light if they're super dry. And you basically let the plants sit in this container of water for about 20 minutes, and they will wick up from the bottom that water into the soil mass. Then after 20 minutes, pull the drain plug or put them in the sink to drain, an empty sink to drain for another 10 to 15 minutes. And Nikki Jabor swears by it. She thinks that it actually helps her from overwatering and underwatering. She feels like she gets more of a consistent watering pattern from bottom watering than she does from top watering. I usually do it with like I have a couple ferns that are just, they dry out so fast that I usually let them bottom water so that I know that the soil is completely saturated. And if you wanted to get fancy, you could Google irrigation, houseplant irrigation systems. They do make them. And the wicked method is, so this is the Wick watering method. And from the research that I found, it was really popular in Europe. You know, they go on longer vacations than we go on. And we usually don't have to worry about our houseplants dying when we're on vacation because we don't go away for that long, but they go away on holiday. And so I found a couple of examples where they, you know, you basically fill a cup with water. You use the cotton cotton cord, and you connect it to your pot. You bury it a couple inches down in the soil, and the water will just naturally wick into the soil. So if you do have a plant up on a shelf that it is kind of hard to water, you know, and take down and water, you could set up a wicking method, and then you just refill the cup of water to keep that water supply going to the plant. So it is pretty neat. I have not tried it myself. Okay, soil or potting medium. So you need good growing medium for your plants to live in. And growing houseplants is technically a form of container gardening. So you do not want to use regular garden soil. It just is too dense. It's too heavy. It usually has diseases and weed seeds, and it can lead to poor drainage. So it is recommended that you use a potting mix or a good potting medium. And a good mix should be dense enough to support the plant. It should hold nutrients, allow for air exchange and water flow, all while retaining moisture, and it will be free from pathogens and weed seed. So they make different mixes, you know, for different things that you're growing, like the orchids. They are epiphytes, so they actually don't even grow in soil. So they make like a bark mix just for orchids. You know, you'll see cactus mix that has like more probably sand or drainage material in it. So it's a drier mix. And then they just have regular houseplant mix. So you can look for a mix that's 50% peat moss, 35% bark, and 15% perlite. The peat moss provides good water retention and is the most common ingredient in houseplant potting soil mixes. The pine bark creates a light mix with airspace, but it doesn't hold a lot of water. And the perlite is a sterile, pH neutral, volcanic rock that increases the airspace and allows airflow in the soil, a good water drainage. So you can make your own mix. If you have a serious houseplant collection and you want to make your own mix, you can, but use a tested recipe. So the University of Florida Extension does have a recipe. If you Google, you know, University of Florida Extension homemade potting mix, it will probably pop up. It's a PDF, and it'll give you a good starting point of the breakdown of percentages of what to add into that mix to make a bulk mix. But usually it's not too bad to just go to, you know, the garden store and buy a pre-made mix. Also, the commercial mixes are pasteurized, so they're pretty good at being weed seed free, pathogen free, which is huge because that's like what would instantly, you know, kill your plant within a couple of weeks, and insect free, which they're not always free of fungus, gnats, but it could help if you buy a commercial mix. Another tip is do not layer your components. I know there's stuff out there that's like, put a layer of sand and put a layer of compost and a layer of gravel. Do not layer the stuff. Your roots are just going to stay at the top of the pot and they'll never make their way down. So go with a standard potting mix. And if you have a bag that's open and it's not enough to fill your pot and you have a new bag, mix them together. Make an equal mix of both so that there's a uniform mixture in the pot. Temperature. So houseplants like it warm, and 65 to 70 degrees for foliage plants. Blooming plants like it a little warmer during the day and cooler at the night, 55 to 60 degrees at night. You want to avoid putting them near heat sources, so do not put them on the radiator, do not put them near the furnace vent, but also avoid putting them near drafty spots, so avoid the back door or front door that gets opened all winter long, the air conditioning unit in the summer. They're temperamental to that, and there's very few plants that have survived being placed over top the radiator vent. You know, that hot, dry air is just blowing on them and they die. Also, in the winter, think about how cold is it near your windows. You know, sometimes it can be 5-10 degrees cooler near that window at night. And don't ever shut your curtains in front of your houseplants and leave them behind the curtain up against the window, because that will kill them too. So just pay attention. Remember, you researched your plant. Does it need to be moved away from the window in the winter to a little warmer, safer spot? Humidity. Almost all houseplants are native to tropical climates, so they love humidity. And of course, our homes tend to be very dry, especially in the winter. So generally, houseplants prefer a relative humidity of 40 to 60%, and they're pretty adaptable to our homes, but some might show signs that they're struggling. They might need a little bit more humidity. If they start to drop leaves or if they develop brown edges, again, that could be from improper watering, but it could be a sign of that they need more humidity. And there are a few things that you can do to increase the humidity around your plants. You can run a humidifier, but you know, who really wants to do that? You're just adding humidity to your home. But you can make a pebble tray. So to make a pebble tray, you take a saucer or like a shallow tote and you put in a layer of pebbles or gravel, and then you fill the water to the top of that gravel and you put the plants on top of the gravel. So the plants are not sitting in the water, they're on top of the gravel and the water is underneath, and that will raise the humidity around them. You can also group your plants together. So in the winter, if the house is really dry, you could make a big pebble tray and put them all together, but just having your plants grouped together will raise the overall humidity around that area, having that moist soil all together. Also, our bathrooms are pretty humid. Out of all the houses, rooms in the house, the bathroom gets the most humid. So try putting the humid loving plants in the bathroom. Okay, containers. So this is the best part, right? Like sometimes picking the container is more fun than picking out the plant. You have terracotta, glazed ceramic, unglazed ceramic, plastic, decorative. But no matter what type of container you pick one with drainage. And of course, the decorative ones, the prettiest ones, they never have a drainage hole. But guess what? The easy solution is just use a plastic nursery pot that fits, it's a little bit smaller, fits down in the decorative pot, and put your plant in that. Then you can actually pull the plastic pot out, take it to the sink, water it, bottom water it, and then you just put it back in the decorative container. So that I do that with a lot of my decorative containers. I did try growing in decorative pots without drainage. I tried the whole gravel on the bottom thing. No, they suffered. They were not thriving. It was too hard to figure out if they were dry, if they needed water. So just use a pot that has a drainage hole, or use the pot within a pot technique. And an interesting story that I watched some Master Gardener talks on YouTube from other extensions, and the one Master Gardener said she tests her pots for drainage before she plants them, because she came across this one plastic pot and she filled it. It had a drainage hole on the side, and she filled it with water, and 24 hours later the pot was still full of water. There was some sort of like design defect. They put the hole where they thought it would drain and it looked prettier, but it never drained the water out. So she had to add more drainage to that pot. So I was like, man, I've never tested to see how fast the water runs out of the pot before, but that could be a factor. Sometimes the drainage hole can become plugged by roots. You can, try to poke your finger through it, or, use a pencil to kind of clear out that drainage hole. But if the roots are coming out of the drainage hole, it might be time to repot the plant. Let's see, I think that's all I have for drainage. And hanging baskets, they do tend to dry out faster just because they're higher up in the air, the warm air rises. So keep an eye on your hanging baskets indoors. I bought one of those fancy ones that it doesn't have any drainage holes, but it has that reservoir down in the bottom. It's still tricky to drain that one. I would buy one that has the saucer attached to the bottom, so you can still put it in the sink, let it drain out, and then when you hang it back up, that saucer will catch whatever drips are left coming out of it. Okay, fertilizer. So newly purchased plants, they will have been fertilized at the nursery if it was a reputable nursery loving their plants. So they shouldn't necessarily need fertilizer for a few weeks. So don't stress about it when you bring home your new plant. And fertilizing once a month is sufficient for most house plants that are putting on new growth or flowering or going, setting buds. And plants in the winter, they do not really need any fertilizer when they're kind of semi-dormant at that point in the winter. They're not putting on new growth, so you don't have to worry about fertilizing. And there are different methods of fertilizing, except for plants that flower in the winter. They would probably need your Christmas cactus, Thanksgiving cactus. They would need a little bump up in the winter. So research your plant, again, get to know it, what it needs. And there's a couple different ways that you can fertilize. So there's slow release tablets, or sticks that you can put in the soil. There's slow release granulars that you put in the soil when you plant. A lot of your potting mixes will come with slow release fertilizer in it, so you don't have to worry about it for a few months. And then there are the liquid types. And so if you're going to fertilize with your liquid fertilizer, the water soluble type, be sure to follow the directions, follow the ratio. Roots are very easily burned turned. So you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to be like, yeah, I'm going to pump this baby full of food. You might kill the plant. So you can either fertilize at every watering. If you dilute the fertilizer to a third of that rate, whatever it says the rate is, dilute it down to a third, you can give it a little fertilizer every time you water. If not, just pick, okay, once a month during the active growing season, I'm going to give it the normal rate of fertilizer and just do it every 3 to 4 weeks instead. But regardless what type of fertilizer you use, still water thoroughly. Water so that the water is running out of the bottom, so it washes any excess salts and mineral buildup out of that soil. Let's see. So nitrogen, that's our major, component of chlorophyll that promotes new growth. So plants that you want to flower indoors, do not give them a high nitrogen fertilizer. Phosphorus promotes root growth and bud development. So you would want to look like a bloom food will have higher phosphorus number and a lower nitrogen number. And then potassium plays the major role for energy transfer within the plant. So if you have just foliage plants and you want it all purpose, you could go with like a 20-20-20, 10-10-10. Or you could do more nitrogen and a lower phosphorus, so that 9-3-6, and then flowers need the higher phosphorus, so it would be 7-10-7. So, when you get in the fertilizer aisle, it can be like mind-boggling with how many are in there. But if the plant isn't blooming, you could just go with a general 10-10-10. Okay, grooming. So they do need a little love. The plants, sometimes you have to wipe the leaves. They get dust on the leaves. Sometimes they need dead leaves, cut out of them, deadheading a little bit. Sometimes they need to be cut back a little bit. Sometimes there'll be like, old spindly growth. You can cut that off. It might promote new growth. One master gardener on the talk that I watched said that she wets 2 sponges and then she puts it on either side of her snake plant leaf and runs it up so it cleans the top and the bottom at the same time. I was like, that is genius. Some people haul all of their plants into the shower and then give them a really nice, light misted shower bath. You can go crazy grooming your plants, but it does help to get the dust off of them. And you want to use sharp scissors or trimmers if you are removing spent stems or leaves. Use something sharp so it's not making a jagged edge and giving that plant a wound. And remove all spent flowers. Christmas cactus, they'll die and fall on the floor. The blooms, you just got to clean those up. So repotting. And after a while, you may need to repot. And repotting, I think, is just a personal preference. I know there are some houseplant people out there that they repot every year, regardless of whether or not the plant needs it or not. And it is nice. It replenishes, gives it fresh soil. I think you can wait a little longer depending on the plant and if you have a good fertilizing schedule. So plants that you brought home from the nursery, they don't really need to be repotted immediately. If you found a decorative container that plant will fit in, you could put it in a pot technique for a while. But if the roots are coming out of the bottom of the pot from the nursery pot, you might want to pot it up. And when you do pot up a plant, they actually prefer to have their roots confined a little bit. So you want to look for you want to select a pot that is 2 inches larger in diameter than the pot that you're currently in. So if you're in a 6-inch pot, you bump up to an 8-inch pot. That spider plant that I showed you in the very beginning, the pineapple plant, I took the little baby plant and I put it in that giant white container and it almost croaked because it was not happy. So what happens when you put it in too big of a pot, you think, oh, it's great. It's got room to spread out. It's going to be fine. It actually is surrounded by too much soil and the roots can't absorb all of the water from the soil and it actually gets waterlogged and you end up drowning the plant. So they really prefer to be in a smaller space. So stick to that 2-inch bump up rule when you're repotting. So most houseplants, you want to look for the signs that they need to be repotted, or if they are root bound. So they'll have extensive roots coming out of the bottom of the pot. Some of them will even break open the pot. Like if they're too root bound, I think spider plants will like eventually bust open the pot. Some plants, they won't take up as much water. Like you'll keep watering and watering and watering, and the water just, the soil can't take any water up because it's so full of roots. So if you find you're like watering all the time, that's a sign that it might need to repot. And it might just, the plant just might be struggling. Like you might just notice it's not putting on any new growth. It's not blooming. It's just kind of stagnant. That might be a time for a repot. So when you do repot, it is helpful to pre-moisten your soil mix. So water your plant first. Give it a drink, let it be hydrated before you take it out of its old pot. Get your new pot ready, figure out your pot in a pot situation, make sure it has a drainage hole, and pick your potting mix. If you have like a tote, I have an old tote that I put my potting mix in, and then I just spray it with the sink hose and mix it up. I have an old like potato masher that I just stir around the soil and get that pre-moistened, because it's a lot easier to pot up a plant, and you can use warm water so that the soil isn't freezing cold. It's easier to put the soil in the container and compact it, not super pound it in, but you can compress it in there a little bit. And then when you put your pot in, you can push the soil in, leave about an inch space from the soil to the top of the pot. And when you water that plant in, it settles the soil more consistently if it's pre-moistened. Sometimes, like if you put super dry potting medium in there, the peat moss and the perlite floats and overflows all over the place and just makes a big mess. So I recommend pre-moistening your potting mix. And then your pot has a hole in it. Well, what do I do? How the soil is going to run out of it? You can use the Monty Don technique and put the broken pot piece over the hole, which who has broken pots laying around? Or you can use a coffee filter and you just put the coffee filter in the bottom. It keeps the soil from falling out. Some people use drywall tape. It's like mesh, mesh wire drywall tape, and they'll put that in the bottom. Eventually the coffee filter will, decompose, and the soil will be like compacted enough where it won't come out of the bottom anymore. Don't put gravel in the bottom. That is a myth. People still debate about it. Put an inch of gravel in the bottom, then put your soil. It actually raises the water level in the pot, and the roots don't have enough, they lose space, so they don't go down as deep. And they say just fill the whole pot with potting mix. Okay, propagation. I mean, we could have a whole talk on propagation. So I'm just going to give you like the, stem cuttings that's it. You cut off a piece of a stem. Everyone's taken a pothos and cut it and put it in a cup of water, and it'll shoot out new roots. That's the easiest method. Rooting and water. Stem cuttings where they need rooting hormone. So I have a prayer plant, and I'll take a stem cutting and then I'll dip it in a little rooting hormone, and then I put it in a small pot, a little starter pot with damp potting soil, and it will send out its roots and grow from there. Leaf cuttings, I think that's where you have to actually take the leaf. So it's similar to stem cutting. You use a sharp knife or scissors to cut the entire leaf with just a little bit of the stem of the parent plant. Remove, any side stems. You want to keep it to like 1 or 2 leaves. And then again, dip it in the rooting hormone, put it in moist soil, potting soil, and keep it moist until it starts to, get root established. Division is another way that you can divide your house plants, just like you do perennial plants. You take it out of the pot and pull the clump apart. There'll be like multiple crowns, and all of this is plant specific. So we have to research, okay, this is my type of plant. this is how you propagate it. And there is a really great list on plant propagation. I'll have to see if it's on my resources. They have a whole chart of not every house plant, but a lot of house plants and what method you use to propagate it. Air layering. Air layering is for non-vining plants. Okay, so layering, so vining plants like a pothos, it has nodes on the stem. So if you take that stem, it's really long over the, the parent pot, you lay it across a new pot of soil and bury some of the vine, it will send out roots from that node on the stem into that new pot. And then you just cut the vine off the mother plant and you've got a new plant established that way. Air layering is for non-vining plants. This one seems really hard. And we have a plant at work that I kind of want to try. It shot up a little baby and I was like, maybe I can try to propagate this, but you have to remove 1 inch of bark above or on the stem. You have to put rooting hormone on it. Then you have to cover above and below the cut area with moist sphagnum moss. And you have to wrap it in plastic wrap, and then you have to let it sit moist for several weeks and it will send out roots, and then you cut it off the stem. But I was like, that sounds really, really hard to do. So I might not do that. So again, if you want to get into propagation, research it, contact the Master Gardener Helpline. They will be very happy to help you figure out what method of propagation your plant needs. Pests, yeah, they still get pests. They come in from somewhere. So when you buy a new house plant, keep it separate, segregate it for a while, put it in isolation before you move it to all of your other precious loved houseplants, because if it has, aphids or spider mites or scale, those babies can hop onto your other plants and it's just a nightmare. Scale, if you have scale, I would just throw your plant away. I've battled it. It's just so hard. If you can't figure out what is on your houseplant or what the problem is, bring it into the Master Gardener Helpline, give them a call. They're more than happy to help you. You want to properly ID what pest it is before you try to treat it, because, some of the chemicals are a little harsher than others. And if you're just, throwing on something that's not even treating the pest you have, it can do more damage to the plant than take care of the pest. So there could be aphids, spider mites, scale. Fungus gnats are, they will chew the root of the plant, the larvae, but they're more of a nuisance than anything. Sometimes thrips. Again, if you take your house plants outside for the summer, going back to light, remember, it's just like seedlings. If you move them onto the porch for the summer, don't just throw them out there so that they're getting blasted by direct sunlight. Harden them off a little, make sure they're in the full shade for several days before you put them in that, even in direct sunlight. You can shock that plant. And then when you go to bring them in the fall, you might want to keep them in the basement or the garage for a couple of weeks if it's not too cold out yet, and just monitor and see okay, what kind of bugs are crawling around on here? Do I need to pre-treat any of these before I bring them back inside? Natarol is a great product from the Gardener's Workshop. You can water it in for fungus gnats. I just have a huge problem with fungus gnats. I cannot get rid of them. I just always have them. And yeah, definitely you might see, leaves dying or discoloration. And some of these pests are so small that you might not see the pests themselves. So you might see webbing or stippling on the leaves. So inspect your plant when you're checking for watering. Check for other signs like, okay, what is this leaf is weird? What's going on here? And see if it's insect damage or if it's improper watering, and kind of go from there. And plants to try. So plants that are hard to kill. Everyone has a pothos, I'm sure. My friend did kill one. I'm very upset. I thought that they were indestructible. That's terrible. Cast iron plant, Spider plant is another one that's really easy. Aloe vera, I don't know. I think you still have to have bright enough light for them. I think they can be a little picky. Snake plants are not hard. I think everyone should try a snake plant to begin with. Dumb cane, Chinese evergreen, peace lily. So there are definitely lots of lists of easy house plants, and I would definitely start with like a low to medium light plant. Those are a little easier to try and maybe more tolerant of your lighting situation at home if you're not completely sure, you know, what my light situation is in, you know, the dining room or whatever, until you get that figured out. And enjoy the journey. You're gonna kill a plant. This little snake plant did not make it from the office move, and master gardeners kill plants. We do, it's true. And the main thing is, do not kill them intentionally. If you know you can't commit to taking care of them, you have a busy lifestyle, you know you're gonna forget about them, don't keep buying them and killing them. And sometimes they surprise you. I got this little cactus to bloom and it was the most glorious thing ever. I have it. It was in that south window. Now it's in a west window. I'm trying to replicate the rain cycle of the desert here. So hopefully it will rebloom this year. And do we have any questions? I don't have my resources posted. I'm sorry. I'll have to email those to Jan.
I've got,
But you first.
I have calla lily bulb.
Oh, okay. A calla lily bulb.
And I put it in potting soil. It's got little growth like this. Is there anything else that I should do? Does that need fertilizer?
We might have to fill out a green sheet for you. For potted calla lily bulbs, I am not familiar, but I think the Master Gardener Helpline could probably do a little research and find a fact sheet for you on what to do going forward. Yeah, so you've got a sprout. That's a good sign. That's a good sign. Yes.
Yes, I couldn't hear you good when you were talking about the light, when it came in from the window. I think you were saying that like light was 5,000 and shade was 24, and then I lost you.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
When it comes through the window and it's close, that's the indirect bright, and you move it farther away. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So the direct sunlight outdoors. Yeah, and so they didn't tell me, the chart didn't say what it was indoors, but I would assume it's below that 1,000. It's
Well, I was just thinking with like a greenhouse effect, how it could maybe intensify the heat.
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
that's my answer, but I thought I was watering enough, but what you're explaining to me is I was giving them too much sun.
Yes,
Thank you.
they, especially if it's a west or a south facing window, if there's no curtains or no trees providing shade outside, it will be very intense on those plants.
That's strong, and I'm finding now in my new place, they do great in the north.
Yeah, because it's that nice, gentle, the north is a good window. It's people think, no, it's too dark, but it's a good window for low to medium light plants.
So can you answer why rainwater or melt snow is the best water for houseplants? Maybe some pH thing, because there's so much junk that it collects from the atmosphere as it falls. So.
Yeah. The extension PDFs, I used Missouri and Oklahoma extension articles, and they didn't give a reason why, but I think it's just because it's not treated. It's naturally occurring water. So we think about our gardens outside, like you water with the hose during the drought, and the plants just don't really look the same as when we get that rain, and they just have that vibrancy, So I think it's because it's the most natural source of water. Do we have any chat questions?
So folks on Zoom, if you'd like to unmute and ask a question or put it in the chat. If nobody else has a question. Another question here?
I was very glad to hear you say about the coffee filter. I just heard that and I'm very glad for that.
Good, yes, the coffee filter over the drainage hole. It's a master gardener technique. We use it for repotting all of our plants for the gala, even like your nursery pot. If you're gonna propagate some perennials, I cut a coffee filter and put it in the bottom of that and then fill with the potting soil and it keeps it contained.
I won't put any more gravel.
Yes, no more gravel. Yes.
I got one of the best things I can ever receive. You know how you have a thermometer? It's a plant thermometer.
Oh.
And yes, it's dry, moist, and you don't have to guess, just stick it in and it runs like a.
So it's like a hydrometer and it tells you, that's very cool. That's very cool. That would be a great gardener's gift.
Yeah. You have one chat question. Thank you.
Could you talk more about what would be best to use for gnats and spider mites? Two different things.
So gnats. Let's see. So fungus gnats, I would use the Natarol. And that is it a, I think it's a BT. So it goes into the soil and the plant takes it up, right now?
I think the Natarol, if it's one of the BT products, either the larvae ingest it and then die, or there's something going on with the larvae.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it hydrates the soil with the BT and the larvae eat, eat the roots in the soil and it kills them that way. Some people have home remedies that they recommend, but as a master gardener, we're just gonna do research-based methods. You can try letting the soil go as completely dry as you can for fungus gnats. They love moist soil. They love to lay their eggs in moist soil. So if you can let that top layer of soil go as dry as possible. Some people also put a layer of gravel on top of the soil to kind of help them so the gnats don't go down into the gravel to lay their eggs. And you can buy the yellow sticky cards to help catch the adults. And that also monitors like how high your population is. And so if you can catch those adults, then they're not laying eggs, but you kind of got to leave the sticky traps up so they can go through their cycle. For the, was it spider mites? The spider mites, so they're chewing and sucking insects. So you definitely want to buy a product that is labeled for spider mites. And it would be a product, systemic probably, because you want the plant to take it up into the plant system so that when they're feeding on the plant, it then kills them. It's really hard to do an on contact treatment, but spider mites, you might be able to, well, the aphids you can shower off. If you shower off aphids, they're soft bodied. You can kill them instantly with a spray of water, put them in the shower and try to spray off your plant. But the spider mites, I think you have to use a pesticide.
Yeah, spider mites can be tough and they don't always react to insecticides the same way as other things do. So you really have to make sure it's labeled for spider mites.
Yeah.
And if you have questions, the Master Gardener Helpline would be able to help you.
Jane.
What about warm soapy water? Something mild like on.
As a master gardener, we go with our research-based stuff. So I can't recommend, anything that hasn't been tested. Yeah.
The soaps can actually.
Yeah, so an insecticidal soap, they have a recipe and it's concentrated to a certain amount. Your Dawn dish soap, your Ajax, whatever, their secret formulas are all concentrated to a different level. So we can't tell you a specific recipe of, this tablespoon to this much water, because each of those soaps has a different concentration and it can injure the plant roots. So I would use an insecticidal soap that's labeled for houseplants.
And the soaps also, because they're frequently degreasers, can actually strip off the waxy layer of your foliage.
Yeah.
All right. I think. Well, thanks, everybody. All right, well, thank you, everybody. I want to thank Brandie today for doing this great program on houseplants. And we'll have it up on our YouTube page, hopefully next week sometime. So I'm going to end the recording now.
Thank you.